All right, so I'm here with five wonderful people. Well, technically four people, and they're more wonderful than
Yeah, I
me,
was about to
but
say, don't overstate it too much.
it's very, very humble of me. Five wonderful people, including myself. No, with amazing folks over here. We got Jepson Taylor, Joe Reis, Ari Kaplan, and Chao. Chao, I don't see your last name on there, so I forgot what your last name is, but here's Chao also. So, and obviously I'm Josue. So today we're just gonna have a fun little talk about everything data, BI, AI, and yeah, it should be a fun, free flowing conversation. What I want to do first to start off, if everyone can give a 30-minute intro, what you do, your name, where you live, your social security number. No, I'm just kidding. Give a quick little intro about yourself. What do you do for work? And let's take it away. Maybe let's start with you, Jepson.
Yeah, sure. So Jepson Taylor, I'm the CEO of Vox. Before that, I worked at DataRobot, Data IQ. That's where I worked at with Ari at DataRobot. I've been in AI for a long time through different industries. Besides that, I really like the outdoors, skiing, climbing, and ultra running.
What about you, Joe?
I'm also in Utah, along with Ben. I can't call you Jepson, man. I know you too long. But yeah, I actually starting a new company right now, so that'll be announced late next month. I guess January, whenever that is. So that'll be a lot of fun. But yeah, what do I do? Right now, writing books, making content. I ran a consultancy. Now I'm just hibernating for the most part, writing and being an erudite all day. So, like Jepson or Ben, I also like to get outside. I rock climb, trail run, do all that stuff. So, yep.
What's the highest mountain you've ever climbed?
Nothing that high actually. More just rock climbing.
By the way, I feel like the two times that we've chatted, you were up to something big. Like I'm going to be announcing this next. I'm going to be announcing this next. Every time it's a cliffhanger for me.
It's always how
Ari,
it
you want
is.
to go ahead and introduce yourself too, please?
Great. Hi, everyone. Ari Kaplan. I'm head of evangelism at Databricks and been here for 2 years. It's kind of like an advocacy role, traveling around the world, talking everything data and AI, and co-authored many books, most recently Data Intelligence Platform for Dummies, and going to be coming out with Data Lakehouse for Dummies, but doing all sorts of fun stuff and worked for many years with Jepson. We had many great adventures, and Chao and I work together now, so that could be a good segue to Chao.
Hey everyone, I'm Chao. Chao Cai. Sorry, forgot my last name there. I work on the engineering side of Databricks. Our team builds AI BI, I guess is what it's called now. Basically dashboards to all the things that are hopefully helping you get access to your data and your AI with much less code and much less trouble. And yeah, I've been at Databricks for a number of years. Prior to that, was at Google doing a bunch of stuff across ads and analytics for many more years.
And I'm Josue. For those of you that don't know me, I'm a solutions architect manager at Kythera Labs, and I'm a product advisor to Sigma, Lumel, and Sunny Data. And I write a lot of content. So I think that should just be my new title. I write a lot. So it's kind of to start with, and anyone can answer first. What have you been up to this year that was an extremely unique project or something very fun you've been working on? Let's start with Ari.
Well, Chow mentioned AI BI dashboards and Genie. Uh, Maybe I'll leave that for him to explain if that's your choice. Otherwise, come back to me. One of the most fun things I didn't mention when I introduced myself, I also have a background in sports analytics, and one of our premier customers, the Texas Rangers, won the World Series about a year ago, and a lot of teams like to keep it proprietary, like what they did behind the scenes. But it was great that they detailed how they went their entire journey. And I was a part of that from before spring training all the way through the season, through the playoffs to the World Championship. I don't want to take any credit at all, but using they had all this big mess of data siloed everywhere. It was hard for people to access it, like that whole democratization play, if we want to drill down in that later. But they had non-technical people that is common in every industry, had to go through tech people to get a dashboard, to ask question to get a business insight. They were also kind of on the converse, had a lot of data that people didn't even know they were collecting. They would fly people in from around the world, from Central America and so on, where devices collect data, and the organization didn't even know they had that. So too much data in one end and data that they had that was not democratized. And specifically, there were some players that they were able to identify through this democratization of data. One ended up being the most valuable player of the World Series. So certainly helped drive insights. And I just love that story since it's an organization that never in history won the World Series. So I love seeing kind of the underdog make it. But it's a democratization story that and making things simpler and more open that really every industry can and should be doing these days.
It's pretty awesome. Jepson, let's go with you. What has been perhaps the most exciting thing for you this year? I know you did that 50-mile ultra marathon thing. I remember that, but on the work side, besides that amazing thing that you did, what was something pretty fun that you worked on?
Well, before we move off of that topic, the reason that was important is it was fasted. So I consumed no calories during the entire run. So that's in my next goal is to do a 100-miler with 0 calories. Other people have done it, but it's amazing what the human body can do if you practice. So for me, I like working on problems that confuse me and make me feel stupid. And for the last year, I've been working on generative algorithms with this new startup. We started by demonstrating that on optimizers, which there's a reason you start with optimizers as an algorithm category to demonstrate runway innovation. And recently, we've been demonstrating this within classical machine learning. So think of XGBoost replacements that are being invented from the ground up using LLMs. Super exciting. I think the last thing I'll add before I wrap up on that topic is it's fascinating because humans have an incredible amount of bias with our life experience. So if you think of the good ideas that you've had, if you're being honest, you can actually kind of reverse engineer it. And humanity has a lot of bias as well. So what's the likelihood that there's a significant mathematical breakthrough that the chaos of humanity just walked right past and it's guaranteed? And so that one of the things we've been working on is allowing LLMs to escape their bias. So how do you increase hallucinations? How do you allow them to be even less predictable when it comes to innovation?
And that makes me think of I think a chat that you gave us some data science forum, I believe, that you were talking about. I believe it was safety versus proficiency, and how the more safety elements you put into the LLMs, generally speaking, the worse the performance is, right? Because it's more bounded by that human those
Yeah,
human elements.
I think if you think about efficiency to the truth, sometimes if for a while we went through a phase where the LLMs were just way over the top with their safety measures, and if you're trying to do things, that can be a blocker, I think. Um, yeah, I did say that a while ago. It just hasn't been top of mind. Now with people being able to fine tune their LLMs, you can quickly get around safeties if you need to. I'm not advocating for that, but just safety is less of a concern, I think, for people doing innovation.
Yeah, that's super important. And I was actually on a panel with Jan LeCun, like one of the fathers of AI, and that was like the whole topic, like an entire hour, innovation versus governance and safety. So Jepson, I wishing you all the best, but that's like if people aren't thinking of that, that's like going to be one of the hottest things coming up. You want to innovate a company, you also want to safeguard it, and where's the balance?
Yeah. I think one thought too to share with the group, there's more code being written today and executed without human oversight. And so that number is only going to increase. So you're moving into a future, we're here today, where massive amounts of novel code are being generated and executed without human oversight. And
Well,
that
I
will just
always joke the
continue.
apocalypse is going to happen because some rogue agent is just going to do a drop table on every single corporate database, and then I will remove -rf on every folder structure, and delete all the backups, and then yeah.
I mean, that's a possibility if LinkedIn trains on my satire post that they're going to start doing dropping table, drop table, drop table. So it's a possibility.
Yeah.
Yeah, You think I'm joking, but we'll see.
Well,
So-
those are only agents with ADHD.
well, you just set the temperature up to like just max it out, right? And then it'll just be unhinged. But
They'll
You
get
know,
bored.
I was gonna save this question for you, Joe, later, but since this topic kind of comes up, I'll throw it in here. Obviously, you're like the data engineering maestro here. Do you think AI overall will be leading to better data engineering practices, best practices, or not really?
I hope so. I mean, I think the jury's out. Like, because I was actually talking to somebody last night. They messaged me and asked, I'm looking at getting into data engineering. Do you think that AI will just replace everything? And it's like, I don't know. I don't think anyone surely knows the answer to this question. But what I can tell you is there's a lot of software that needs to be written, and there's a lot of data that needs to be made and cleaned and addressed and so forth. So if you're coming at it from a scarcity mindset, I suppose, uh, AI may negatively impact data engineering and make it worse. But I think there's an abundance of things for us to do. This is inspired by an article. I can't remember who wrote it, but just the sheer amount of technical debt that we have in this world right now, of things that have yet to be invented, of things that have yet to be made because we're so swamped. That to me is the promise that AI holds, and that we can get around to tackling these problems and move on to solving bigger and better problems. So yeah, I hope that this thesis turns out to be right. The alternative is absolutely none of us have anything to do anymore, and then that's an extreme position which I don't think anyone here wants to entertain. So, but it's up to us. I think it is up to us. It's up to people right now who can lead the charge and make things happen. But as you look around, I mean, companies exist to solve problems, but there's so many problems to solve. So I think that and if data is running this whole thing, the algorithms and machine learning and so forth, I see a world of possibilities.
Thank you for that. Wanted to get that question out of the way there. What have you been up to this year, Joe?
Nothing at all.
He's lazy. Joe doesn't do anything.
I don't do anything. Well, actually, it depends what you mean
Taking
by that.
product pitches.
Yeah, just shilling for everybody in sight. It's been great. No, I'm kidding. What have I been up to? I mean, the biggest one that I launched this year was data engineering specialization with entering and deep learning AI on Coursera. So that was, I think we've been working on that well over a year, and that launched in September. So that was a big milestone because I think that's and AWS has also partnered with it, but it's a big course. And so I think that was really cool to see that. I mean, actually after this, I'm recording more audio for it. We're actually not done with it, but that was a big one. And then, working on a new book right now, sort of as I stepped back and looked at the universe of applications, analytics, and AI, what I realized is there's use cases are starting to morph, right? Machine learning is becoming embedded in software systems. Analytical stuff is, it's all these things are sort of morphing together. But so we're also dealing with multimodal use cases. Nothing new, but I think you're starting to see sort of the convergence of different forms of data along different use cases. And so one thing I've been working on is this idea of what I jokingly call mixed model arts, kind of taken after mixed martial arts, and it's this unified theory of data. And so part of the mission of the book is to teach practitioners different data modeling techniques, different ways of working with data up and down use cases across different modes of data. And so that's the book that'll be coming out next year. And who knows, maybe there's a product there too. I don't know. But that's been a lot of fun. So, started writing that book. Along the way, had other people interested in writing books with me. With this new company I'm starting, so it might give you an idea of what it's going towards. But so there's a lot in the works right now. So,
Chao, besides having like 1/4 of the content for the main speech at the Databricks Summit being about products that you've been working on, what have you been up to this year that was exciting?
Just besides that, no, that's small stuff. No, I'm kidding. I think a lot of the stuff that I've been focusing on is just really making sure that AIBI is in a good place. We went from being in a small public preview early in the year to really getting both the dashboards and the Genie side now out so that anyone can get access to it. Anyone can use it to sort of democratize their access to data and AI. It's been really fun to see along the way. We have a relatively small but very talented team, so we've had to really pick and choose what we do first. And so we've been really leaning on everyone's feedback, including Josue's, to make sure that we're actually prioritizing the right things to build first. And the goal is really to try to get to as many people's use cases as quickly as possible.
I think what I love about the work that you and your team are doing is that you are building a product in a field that has sometimes a lot of hype around it. And I like that you're pretty based on what you're saying it is possible to do with it and what it's not. And honestly, that's one of the things I really appreciate about the your team overall and kind of what you're doing there. So
Oh, appreciate it. I mean, we tend to try to focus on real customer use cases. Like the hype can wait. We'll worry about that later.
so with that said, kind of touching a little bit on Genie, obviously, Ari and Chao, you were coming at it from where you are a vendor, where you're representing a vendor that does that type of self-service analytics. So I'll ask this question to Jepson and Joe. Uh, there is a lot of back and forth on whether the concept of self-service analytics is a real thing or a real possibility to attain or not. I'm curious as to your thoughts as to Jepson, from your perspective. Do you see a future where perhaps the junior analyst roles are overall not needed as much? And Joe, I'm curious from your perspective as well on this.
I hope so. I actually want to take it a step further, and I see a future where you have agents that are doing preliminary analysis and finding value on their own while you're sleeping. So imagine waking up in the morning and having a dashboard or stack ranked report of all the analysis that could have been done by humans but was done by agents instead. So I'm hoping for that future. I don't see any reason why, especially using Databrick or other technologies underneath the hood, that should be fine.
What about your thoughts, Joe?
It's interesting. The term self-service has been bandied about in the industry for a long, long time. I'm sure all the grizzled veterans have heard various versions of self-service. So, but to me, what self-service means today is the ability for data to be accessible by theoretically anybody in an organization and useful to anybody in an organization. I think first and foremost, believable to anybody in an organization. But I mean, hopefully this comes about. So what gets in the way of self-service right now? I think it's an interesting question that I can maybe pose to the broader group. In my perspective, at least, what gets in the way is usually the underlying data. It tends to be modeled in a way that's maybe represents one aspect of an organization, but doesn't more broadly address the understandability or the needs of the broader organization. And so this is the classic dilemma of, well, what do you mean by customer? Well, or that kind of thing, right? Something we've been dealing with this for decades. And so, hopefully this is addressed. Maybe I think the incorporation of knowledge graphs and LLMs hopefully provides generalizability and context that's sorely needed, because the manual ways we've been trying to address self-serve analytics over the past few decades, I think, we've been trying that. We beat that thing to a bloody pulp, and I would say we're no farther along than we have been. So I'm open to new ideas, new technologies. I think it's really the way it's going to be, and I've been talking about this more in the broader context of data management as well, where I feel like we've been crying the same old tropes for a long time. Like, we need to get more value from our data and all this stuff. I'm like, great. Tell me how we've been doing that over the past couple of decades. It's manual, it's rough, right? And you're dealing with organizational stuff, but and more broadly, there's an interesting article I was reading yesterday, Programming Mutter, I think it was, or something like that. But it was this article where it talked about how LLMs provide a really good opportunity to actually change the nature of management as well in organizations. And so I think this really cuts to more of the crux of why self-serve is hard, because at the end of the day, you're trying to manage data and you're trying to summarize data and trying to make it accessible across various domains. Well, LLMs are pretty good at this, actually, right? And so I think this potentially unlocks a lot of the capability that so far has been, in the hands of people wearing black robes and living in shielded data governance guilds and so forth. And hopefully this opens up some possibilities. But at the rate that data is being generated, I mean, it's inconceivable that humans can somehow magically come to the occasion today when we haven't been able to do it on kilobyte and megabyte sized data sets in the past. So I'm hopeful. We'll see.
Yeah, and that problem is getting more and more vast as data has just been exploding. Like the challenge of like master data management. You mentioned like who is a customer. At the beginning of a company, they may have one table, one column with customer data, and then it's easy. But over time, you may have thousands of tables or tens of thousands of tables and columns, and either it's like customer underscore LPL, customer underscore NP7, and like nobody really knows what that is, or it's in someone's head, or you have everything that has the word customer and it's non-descriptive. So this is where I think we're at, end of 2024 through 2025 is using LLMs to make sense of like what the underlying data is, then making it easier for if somebody says, what is a customer? It knows, hey, they're in the marketing department or they're in Europe. They may only be caring about European customers, whatever it is, helps it. But then back to Jepson's point, you want humans in the loop to reinforce it. So having humans have the ability to give a thumbs up, thumbs down, retype it, or just have the AI learn as hundreds or thousands of people are asking questions, like maybe pop, like what Google did, pop the most seemingly accurate ones to the top. So that's where I'm super excited about. And I know Chao had mentioned AIBI Genie, and not sure if everyone knows what that is, but that's kind of the crux. And whether it's AIBI Genie or the market as a whole I think everyone's going to be implementing more intelligence into everything through AI onto traditional, BI data warehouse.
But
Yeah, it's worth noting that self-service doesn't necessarily imply there's no humans involved at all. Self-service is hopefully just getting to a state where if you're trying to define something across the organization, you do it once. You don't have to end up having to redo it over and over again as you ask an analyst a question, go chase after stuff, etc. I mean, take a classic metric of retention. There's 15 million different ways you can define it. So sometimes self-service is about sort of surfacing what you propose as a definition and then creating the right collaboration so that whoever needs to decide on what the correct definition is across the organization can actually do so efficiently. And then beyond that point, teach it to a human, teach it to an LLM, teach it to everyone, and hopefully everyone can consistently use it.
And I'll add two notes on this. I think, Joe, to your point, I personally like the BI world and the data engineering world. That's a lot near and dear to my heart. I'd say it's a combination of just bad data modeling practices, really, and as well as, sounds very generic, but let's take aside. Let's say you have good data models in place. I think comes from technical individuals, not educating non-technical individuals there and business users really how to use the very bare minimum for being able to do their reporting themselves. It's more like, hey, here's this model, here's revenue, nothing. Being able to explain, hey, this is the type of reporting that is possible with this. This is the type of reporting that you can't do. And I think technical people tend not to be very patient or take the time to educate the business users that are not technical on how to use these tools. I think that's one of the problems. And I will kind of, to some extent, challenge back Ari on, okay, so we have LLMs doing self-service analytics, okay, or helping with self-service analytics, but then how do you deal with hallucinations, right? Which I know is one of the things that Genie is working hard on. But then, if you become too dependent on pure LLMs as they are right now when it comes to data, it could lead to some bad business decisions.
Yeah, and so that's like awesome topic. That's one of the biggest challenges. Like so many companies start off saying we want to do a chatbot, which is one of the many implementations of LLMs. And then there could be either hallucinations or answers that are not quite the way you want to frame it. So it ends up being, most companies make their chatbots internal to have like employees. Like I use, it's called Marge. It's a marketing genie to find, what events were most successful, what ebooks were downloaded most. And that's kind of harmless, but helpful as well. But companies are still hesitant to put things out to their customers, since even if it's accurate, 99 out of 100 times, if 1 out of 100, it says, we will pay you money to buy our product, or it's a negative price, the media would eat it up. So, companies are doing a couple things. One is making the models like on open source as opposed to closed models, making the models called agentic systems, where you have smaller models that are really good on predicting traffic, predicting weather, or predicting sales, or things like that for little cases, and then stringing them all together. So it's, hopefully more accurate, open source versus closed. But then I think the most important thing is having the data trained on your own corporate data. Since if you use a generic LLM, it's trained on Taylor Swift, it's trained on World War I statistics or trivia, but you want it trained on your own data, and making sure, like it's this whole, Jepson and I worked on machine learning ops, and now it's AI ops. What happens when the data drifts? What happens when the model drifts? Like who's in control? Who gets to decide if a model's good enough to go into production? So those are ways that you reduce hallucination and get trust. And that's really where the whole industry is, scratching their heads. How can they improve to keep pushing the line and making that more accurate?
That's fair.
One thing I'll add is, in addition to all the traditional ways you can actually try to improve model accuracy, some of the more interesting challenges, at least as we've been developing AIBI, has also been around sort of UX design. How do you actually sort of present the information when it's not necessarily always going to be trustworthy? And how do you actually present a blend of information where some of it has been verified by experts and some of it has not? So that's something that we've been really trying to figure out good solutions around, in basically getting to a place where the model doesn't have to always be accurate. You know that there's going to be holes in its understanding, but then as the customer uses it, can you actually adapt to their level of knowledge, their level of ability to verify the model output, and try to actually sort of guide them toward treating it in the right way, depending on whether you have enough trust in the system.
Do you, and perhaps this is more of a Jepson question, but I think others can chime in too. Do you think that realistically, where the market is right now in 2024, do you think that there is a disconnect between the marketing of AI and the actual capabilities of AI?
That's hard. The way I've been thinking about it recently is 90% of people they stub their toes and they're disappointed, and then you have 10% that are determined to make it work no matter what. So all the things that these systems do poorly, catastrophic forgetting, you could come up with a list of things. You have a 5 or 10% sliver in the market where they're just making it work regardless. They're just building more advanced agent systems to handle it. So you have kind of the two sides of disappointment. It's overhyped, it's not there yet, and then you have a small sliver that's being very productive.
No, you used the phrase being determined to make it work. Is it being determined to make it work because there is real business value that
Yeah.
there
Oh
is,
yeah,
or
there's real business value. So for people that want to automate QA testing, I would say, is there something off the shelf that will do that reliably? No. If you are determined to make it work, yes, you can make it work, and you can come up with systems that can escalate, potential intermediates or things that aren't working quite well. I'm pretty bullish on agents being much more capable than people realize. I think the main thing is large context windows suck, and there are things you can do to manage that much better.
would you then say, Jepson, that it's not so much that there is a disconnect between the actual potential of these tools and what they can accomplish, but mainly how accessible they can be to get started and go
Yeah,
from zero to project.
yeah. Maybe a good analogy would be Legos. Like if you buy a Lego set and you're disappointed, then you can't do much. But if you're determined to rebuild it or re-engineer it, you'll be fine. So the extensibility of these systems and the potential capabilities are all there, and they're quite profound. But you have a lot of people that are still they're not seeing the value, and I would say they're not determined.
We've been to conferences. I think everyone here. There's a lot of. One of my favorite things to do is walk around conference halls and just look at vendors' pitches for AI. I don't say anything. I just observe, take pictures, making me make mental notes. But I mean, I think there's, especially from last year to this year. I mean, there's no doubt that every vendor has suddenly become an AI vendor of some sort, right? It's kind of the prisoner's dilemma. You either do it or your competitors are going to do it, so you're going to do it because that's just how that works. So, and it is interesting. I think there are definitely some claims I see from certain vendors where I kind of scratch my head and swear to myself and walk off in a bit of a storm of heated anger to myself and to them. But that's how it is. That's how every hype cycle is, right? And we're at the beginning of another one. But we've been here before, right? We've been here with deep learning. We've been here with other advancements. We're here with big data. We're here with other hype cycles. The difference between now and then is AI got consumerized, right? So everybody now it's top of mind. Like I can, my kids use ChatGPT, right? I think that's the big difference. My kids weren't using deep learning for a lot of reasons. They were also really young back then. But so it captured everyone's imagination. I mean, Jepson and I were at a certain conference in the Middle East last year, and I was walking around, and I saw a fiber optic vendor that was claiming to be an AI company. I was like, okay, this kind of jumped the shark a bit, right? And so, but when it comes to reality now, I think last year was all about let's imagine the possibilities of this thing, right? Generative AI. Along the way, generative AI also became synonymous with classical machine learning and everything else, right? So now it's just everything's AI. Right? Don't even get started on this one.
The calculator, AI.
Calculators AI, yeah. It's like my coffee mug's AI. It's crazy, but so I would sit in these panels, and people would be like, singularity is going to be here in 3 years. I'm like, because of ChatGPT, I don't think you know what you're saying at all. But you're trying to say outlandish stuff because you're on a panel, basically. And I remember I lost my stuff on one person, just sort of went ballistic. It's poor person, because you see a lot of these pronouncements, right? But at the end of the day, what's happening this year is I think things are becoming more grounded in reality. People are trying this stuff out on their data sets. I think more it's shining a mirror on how bad your data is. Like the question I've asked probably to tens of thousands of people in my talks around the world is, would you put an LLM on top of your data today, sight unseen, and expect it to work? And second, would you bet your job that it's going to perform out of the gate? Nobody raises a hand. Because I think in the back of the head, they're like, yeah, I kind of want to, but I don't know. If you put it that way, maybe I won't. So, but this is, I think what's happening now with the conversations I'm seeing is people are investing in, things like data quality, right? You didn't hear these discussions, observability. You didn't hear these discussions taken seriously today, right? Data observability is one of these things where it's like, yeah, I'll get around to it when I get around to it, which will be like never. Or fixing my data, right? Data quality is one of these things where we always harp on it. Like we have to get good data, garbage in, garbage out. Now there's investments being made. The vendors I talk to who are in the data quality space, they're very busy right now. And so it seems like companies are finally taking these investments seriously. It's something I always ask. I mean, if you have all this hype and attention right now with AI, and data is a core ingredient to making this work, if you don't fix this today, when are you ever going to do it? Right? You have all the attention, all the money that can be thrown at this like right now. So, but it seems like it's happening.
Yeah, one of my favorite quotes, probably my favorite techie quote from the year, traveled to all conferences, and one of our co-founders, Arsalan, said, kind of summarizing what you just said, Joe, that like 5-10 years ago, probably all of us on our call were, talking data and kind of having to whisper, you guys should try AI. It's kind of cool, but you feel weird, so you have to whisper it. And now today it's the opposite. Everyone's shouting AI, and you have to kind of whisper, you really need good data underneath for a foundation. And then it also reminds me of everyone on AI, the fiber optic, like a meme of Leo DiCaprio, make me invest in your pen company, and pushes a pen and it's like, this pen is powered by AI. So like everything
Oh yeah,
is
sell me this
AI.
pen. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what's funny, Ari?
funny.
I think I remember like 4 years ago. I think there was a year where a lot of people were saying AI, but this was before ChatGPT, and it was the end of the year. And I remember making a post like, "Hey, I am glad that the year of AI is over." And 2 years later, it's back. I was like, "Okay, fine. I'll call it AI this time." But to your point, I've seen AI powered light bulbs, which is just mind-boggling to me, if you ask me. So,
Well, I
um,
remember Jepson when we were, this is a long time ago, but there was a certain startup we were involved with, more tangentially, but we actually couldn't use the term AI because it was unfashionable. If you were to use that, you may as well like have a giant mullet or something. I mean, it wasn't that cool. Actually, mullets are pretty cool now, but I mean, it was machine learning or predictive analytics back then, right? If you used AI, nobody would take you seriously. Now everyone takes. If you use anything else except AI, nobody's going to take you seriously.
We
So
had a
I don't
similar
know.
trend when we were building marketing attribution tools in Google. We had to call it data driven because back then AI wasn't a thing yet.
Oh, really? That's interesting.
I mean, even part of Databricks' big marketing still is like, hey, we have strong data engineering fundamentals in there, foundation there. So that's why your AI is good. So
Well, you haven't called yourself AI Bricks,
Oh, there's a thought.
so
I have too much brand already invested. But
yeah,
yeah, but I know AI, there's hype where everyone is just riding the bandwagon. Was at AWS reInvent, and my brain just turned off since every single vendor had AI in it, and half the vendors had the same buzzwords. But those that will long term survive will either be the companies that like are the plumbing underneath, which is why I'm thrilled to be where I am, or kind of what we're all are hinting on, like a specific like end applications that AI makes it better. So whether it's like a, a personal assistant that goes through your emails, or Jepson's idea, it goes and comes up with ideas while you sleep, and then you wake up and it gives you ideas of what the human can take action on. Like those are really helpful. Or some of the co-pilots may not be good enough for standalone product, but things that really help will break the hype from helpfulness.
oh yeah. I mean, starting a new company is awesome. Sorry, but there's one thing. Like it's when you start a company today, it's awesome because you can reimagine what a company should be and start from the ground up using AI. So I'm like, let's put the pedal to the metal. Let's do everything. Why not? So
Yeah.
sorry, Chai. Look like you wanted to say something.
Oh no, no. I mean, I was just gonna echo something you mentioned earlier, which is that like the role of things like data quality is super important now, in part because if you sort of rewind a couple of years, before we were dealing with sort of Gen AI based BI and we were looking at classical BI, 99% of the data is just left on the floor, and your actual decision making at the boardroom is really just using 1% of everything that's being collected. Now you actually have an opportunity to really create this tight feedback loop between the product and all the data it's generating, so that you actually have sort of AI and machine learning models try to drive as many of the fine grained decisions as possible while still reserving some of the coarse grained decisions to the humans.
going back to everyone selling AI. My thoughts as I would say someone, but my thoughts on it is this: everyone is saying AI, AI, AI. Very few companies are actually demonstrating what it looks practically to implement AI. No one is saying, "Hey, you do business with us as your platform. You do business with us as this XYZ provider. 90 days from now, if you're in XYZ industry, this is you're going to be able to get your supply chain planning done right. You'll be able to do this." Very few. A lot of companies rely on like SIs and whatnot to do that, but I think when your competitors are selling the same thing as you got to differentiate yourself by setting up the expectations as to this is what it's going to look like in your business. To quote Kai Labs' CEO, he told me once like, hey, when you're selling AI, you got to paint the picture as to where in the org chart of that company that AI solution fits in. Who is it going to help? Who is it the assistant of? Who is it the intern for? Like with Genie, right? Chao. So where does it fall? And I think that's one of the things that a lot of companies are missing that I'm hoping more start to get right. At least that's gonna set aside the good companies from the bad ones, right? The ones that say, hey, this is what it actually looks like. This is what you can hold us to. And again, a lot of companies won't do it, but the ones that do, I think, are the ones that are gonna survive. So
I suspect that part of the challenge there is like if you look at the first 90 days, a good chunk of that time is just going to be going into your company and auditing how good the data is.
correct.
Like if the data is terrible, you got to clean that up first.
Well, yeah, the time frame is more. It's more like a picture. It can be 180, it can be 365 days, but more of a roadmap for it. This is what it looks like, assuming XYZ condition. This is what you should expect. Versus, hey, we have the model, we have this other model. And one quick question to you, Jepson, and then I'm going to ask a broader question. Oh, then I'm going to ask one for Joe. Jepson, just for clarity, I know you've mentioned agentic a few times in one of the talks that I saw you do online. Again, I think at the Data Science Forum, you mentioned AI and internal dialogue as one of like the critical elements. I don't know if that rings a bell.
Yeah.
Would you
Um,
equate this agentic and internal dialogue as being the same thing or not quite?
with agentic workflows, when that came out, I think a lot of people were already doing it. So the idea of reflection and feedback or using a tool or planning, a lot of people were doing that out of the gate, and that was in those publications. But I think one of the things that I'm really excited by are, um, I don't know if anyone's really called it a category, but adaptive workflows. So think of it as a population of agents that are goal chasing and they are iterating and learning together using evolutionary processes. And so that's what we use internally for algorithm design, but you could use that for any system that has some type of measurement. You can use that. If you don't have a measurement, then a measurement of success. Here's a good example. What if I want to write, if I want to have AI that writes a chapter that is aligned with my voice, you can imagine some type of iterative process where there's an agent that is comparing that writing to some of my past writing. Or better yet, just skip all that complexity and just fine tune an agent based on my past writing. So I think when you said the internal dialogue, I think of that as adaptive systems that are communicating based on a fitness score.
For I think I'm gonna. This is for Jepson and Ari. Joe, I know you travel a lot internationally too, but I think Ari and Jepson do a lot more specifically to the AI. But you can chime in on this one too. Well, actually, yeah, I'll throw your hat in the ring there too. How do you? How is AI in data engineering perceived here in the U.S. versus, say, Europe or even Asia and the Middle East, which I think Jepson, you and Ari travel there a lot. So I'm just curious as to the expectations that individuals and companies have there versus the expectations that companies have here in the US as they make all these investments and decisions, both from the consumer standpoint as well as from the vendors standpoint as well.
Yeah, it's yeah, it is definitely global with different like perceptions, also different laws. Like you have GDPR, you have HIPAA in the states, but then it's also by industry vertical. Like I was at HIMSS, which is like a health life science conference, and they're to Joe and everyone's point, they're still working on the data, and they will be working on the data a year from now, 2 years, and 5 years from now. And a lot of things are on prem and in different silos. So some markets, to a large degree, there's a lot of health life science companies that are really advanced, but public sector or Department of Defense, each country is very different. Some are like completely locked down. Others are a bit more innovative. Some are not held by the same ethical or technical limitations. Technical, being like rules-based technology, and it's all over board. Like I was just in the Nordics a few times, and where the states, the job opportunities are a bit wonky right now. Like I know a lot of people who are out of work, but in EMEA, every event I've been to, they would put QR codes saying, we need to hire people. We can't have enough. Like every single vendor was like a poaching conference as well as an educational conference, and I found that to be pretty amazing. But then some of the qualifications were like, we need a data engineer that speaks Swedish, so it's like very rare to find people who are available with that. But yeah, it's part cultural, it's part legally based, it's part how progressive have they been in getting the underlying data in place, and then also a skill set. There are people. I've been at companies that like literally you would think they would have 500 data engineers and they only have 5. So a lot of people are strapped productivity wise.
What about your take on that, Joe?
Yeah, I echo a lot of what Ari's said. I think there's, no matter where you go in the world, there's enthusiasm for AI right now. I can't think of anywhere I've been in that's in most places where people aren't interested. But it does come down to, execution comes down to culture. It comes down to regulations, right? So the EU has the new EU AI Act as well, and that, who knows what's going to happen with that. It definitely sets a framework for EU and anyone affecting EU citizens. So that's most countries. But the culture, it's interesting. There's certain pockets in Europe where I think there's people more kind of gung ho and doing stuff with AI and data engineering than others, right? Some countries are just more conservative than others. Some countries are just more kind of leading the charge. France is one that comes to mind in terms of one where there's a lot of activity there. I was just there a couple weeks ago, actually. And it's a great scene there right now. Is it the U.S.? No. Does it need to be the U.S.? No, it doesn't. It's uniquely French and it's uniquely European. I think that's what's awesome is you're seeing these pockets, different geographies doing stuff the way they want to do it. India is another example, right? I'm in a WhatsApp group with a lot of, prominent engineers in India. And the thing I learned there is, places like Bangalore, they're like, well, should we become the next Silicon Valley? And I chimed in. I was like, I don't think you need to. I think you should lean into what's going to make you great and what really works for you. Like, why do you have to copy it? People just do it the way you want to do it. And I think that's what you're going to start seeing more is just, I wouldn't call it a multipolar world, although it is happening geopolitically as well. But, just people are going to leverage AI to the way that it helps their economies and it helps their businesses flourish, right? And so that's more of what I'm seeing. Everyone looks to the U.S. as sort of the fountain of inspiration, at least for technology. But I think people are also wise enough to realize that they're not going to build the next Silicon Valley because there is only one Silicon Valley and there always will be only one Silicon Valley but that's what makes it pretty cool. So.
In India, it was eye-opening. I went there for the first time. At one point, I was president of the Worldwide Oracle User Group back in the day, and I had so many invites to come to people's houses and never had the opportunity. But this year, finally made it, and Bangalore, went to like a Databricks. They called it startup event where they had executives from startup partners. And so I'm thinking, 5 people, 20 people, but for them, a startup, like there are a lot of companies that were over $1 billion. I'm like, are you a startup? And so the advancement was insane. And then I was a little bit nervous, but I had to give my first demo that I gave was to the developer summit in India, where people are the most hardcore developers. But for them, it was all how are copilots like in Visual Studio going to be changing their world. So on one hand, really, really like hands-on techie people, and on the other, billion-dollar startup entrepreneurs, and like a dozen or so of them.
And the scale of India is it's hard for people to imagine here because we have our own version of what a startup should look like, but there it's a different story. I mean, there's more engineers there, I think, anywhere else in the world, and they're all hungry to do stuff. I mean, I don't think we realize, if you come from America, you don't realize how competitive it is there. Like, people there are hungry and they're driven.
Like the whole having to give like a 2 months notice or something to leave a job or something like that. I think it's the requirement on a lot of those businesses, and that's crazy to me. Jepson, do you have anything to add on this one too? I know you're a little bit of a world traveler too.
I still haven't been to India, which is interesting. I was just going to add kind of that point that there's a lot of Indian CEOs in the U.S., and I think it goes back to that filter and the competition. When you hear the stories of some of these individuals that come to the U.S. and the filter that takes for them to do that, I think it's no surprise that you see a lot of these people ending up in as CEOs of top companies.
So, Joe, one of the things that I'm personally seeing a lot of is a little bit of a let's move away from the cloud movement. Or at least a lot of individuals saying, hey, we're going to bundle our own tools, DuckDB, use this, just so that. Do you see that as, I'm curious from your perspective, do you see that as a rising trend, or maybe that's just what I'm seeing come up, but not really something that is really happening behind the scenes?
Anecdotally, I am seeing this actually. I'm seeing companies, I think for more predictable workloads, by servers, um, even like a Raspberry Pi and just move it back to the to that. In fact, it's interesting. I was having a conversation the other day, yesterday actually, with a friend. She was thinking of some ways to do a cost-effective analytics serving, I think, out of a cloud bucket, and just having it, like each customer just read. And it's like, well, why don't you just use like DuckDB Wasm and just read from like Google Cloud Storage or something? I was like, that would be pretty simple. Or just read from DuckDB. I don't care. But like, these are the kinds of conversations people are like having at this point, right? And so I think it's this notion that, but so people I think want more control of their stack to some degree, and so there's some options out there. But it depends. This also means like now you're going to have to fine tune your governance and your privacy and security to deal with all this. And do you really feel like that's a great idea that you should be taking on? So I think that's sort of the argument of cloud, but it's definitely not where it was a few years ago, where it was all cloud all day. Like you're definitely, at least anecdotally, again, I don't know the numbers, so this is kind of just take it for what it's worth. But I am hearing conversations about this. At the same time, cloud's as big as ever. Like it's just, for as many conversations I hear, people trying to do stuff on their laptops. And today we have great machines. Granted, looking at my Mac Studio right now, and things an absolute beast. Does that mean I need to run my business off of it or my data stack? Depends what it is, right? But if I have a big company, I'm probably going to still be using something that's more managed, in the cloud. So yeah, what are the people seeing out there? I'm very curious.
Yeah, and honestly, I've, at least from my perspective, obviously the reason why I bring it up, I have seen a little bit more of like, oh, for smaller data sets, use this, use that, and I like the idea. I think the idea from thinking pure technical cost, yeah, that can make sense. But the flip side to that is going back to the older days where there was a lot of homebrewed solutions that kind of created a little bit of architectural mess with a lot of, I would say, gaps in the stack too, with like kind of, I think that someone pointed out here, the securities. But I was curious just to see if that wasn't just me, that had
I
been
don't think we're
seeing
going
that.
back to Microsoft Access anytime soon. So
Access and SharePoint, man, that's where it's at. That's the best.
yeah, watch
that's
it
the
actually
best
takes
stack.
off, and it's super popular.
How you're building very heavily using a lot of different LLMs for what you do. How do you balance building a stable project while so many new versions and capabilities are coming out at the same time, and you're trying to build something stable for the long term?
Yeah, this is where there's a very underappreciated part of building such a product, which is the modeling evaluation side of things. Like you can't actually verify that things are stable unless if you have the testing, even if it's probabilistic, to make sure that the general conditions still hold, the answers are still coming out fairly consistently. The fact that a certain question is yield a certain answer yesterday means they still answer things today. You can't actually assume that given LLMs because of things evolving so fast, because of things moving so fast. So really just having the guardrails there in terms of sort of automated testing, benchmarks, etc., is really like sort of necessary to make sure that that happens. Beyond that, yes, at the edges, if you ask a super random esoteric question we've never thought of covering, it could still be probabilistic. It could still fluctuate. But you know what? If you actually care enough about that, then you would actually curate your organization's data model well enough and teach the LLM that so that it doesn't actually deviate from what you consider ground truth.
Yeah, I want to hear your thought, Josue, on like what you've seen, what you're excited about, what you're working on.
I'm working on 1,000 different things. So Generally, from what I'm excited about, perhaps for 2025, honestly, 2024 was a very interesting year for me, and just writing a lot more content, being a lot more out there than I have been in past years. So, by God's grace, it's been a very fun, unique experience. Uh, so, I'm really excited just to see w- how 2025 goes, balancing life with my 5 kids and my wife while doing all this content and keeping things fun and engaging, and just trying to keep things as fluff free as I can. I'm excited. Obviously, I've done some partnerships like with Sigma, with Lamel, and Sunny Data. So hoping to see those grow and really help those businesses out. So, and while helping Kai throughout too, which is my daytime employer. So I'm a very simple guy. A lot of people think, oh, you're planning ahead all this content. I'm like, no, it's literally day by day. It's like, okay, what should I write about? What are people talking about today that seems like an interesting topic to write about? And I'm excited to go to the Databricks Summit next coming year. I think it was my first tech conference in 2024. It was the first time ever going to a tech conference, so I'm excited just to see just to be there again. It's a lot of energy, a lot of good food in San Francisco. So those are the simple things I'm excited for in terms of technology. I'm excited for the hype to hopefully go down a little bit on AI, and to see companies realizing that they need to actually be practical about it. Uh, it's it's a blessing and also a pain to be in the industry, in terms of seeing so much hype and so many vendors that perhaps have otherwise very good products sometimes hyping up AI so much that actually deters from what really drives value for their business. So I'm excited to hopefully see that die down a little bit, and seeing companies being more practical with, like I said, what does AI mean to me?
Just wanted to make sure before we break to thank all the listeners for being out there. Please follow all of us on social. We all are, we all have our own unique journeys and experiences, some fun, adventurous, some inspirational, some educational. So recommend following all of us for anyone listening out there.
Except me, you might get offended. Follow me.
And I'm not just saying it because I'm just here with you guys, but really it was some of the highlights for me. I think was hanging out with you, Ari, in New York City. That was very fun.
That's great.
Joe, getting to do that like 15 or 20-minute interview with you, that you didn't think it was an interview at first, but you thought it was just me asking you some question, and I kind of ambushed you into an interview, and that was a very fun experience. And
Happens.
obviously, Chao, hanging out with you in I think at Summit, as well as here in Atlanta. That was a lot of fun. So with that said, thank you so very much for
Thank you.
coming, Jepson, Joe, Ari, and Chao. Um, if if you enjoy this video, make sure you follow all these folks here on LinkedIn or whatever other social media they have. Make sure you read Joe's book, as well as whatever else he is about to deliver in the next 24 hours. No, I'm just kidding. So thank you so very much for being here, y'all.